Inside the Birds is back. What's going on, everybody? It's Geoff Mosher, Adam Caplan. A little extra oomph on that intro there. You know, I'm a little fired up. Like I always tell you, Adam, or at least the last few weeks, when we only do this twice a week instead of 3 times a week, it just like I get the energy popping in me. So I got to give them it all on the intro like that. So I'm glad to be back. You and I have a lot to talk about. The last time we did a podcast, we wrapped up our positional primer talking about defensive backs. Thought it was a really thorough discussion, but we're inching closer to free agency now. It's right around the corner. We've talked about the Eagles, their financial situation, and the moves that they have to make to get compliant with the cap, and then, of course, to get underneath the cap to make more moves, and they've made some. So we'll get into that. I look forward to having that discussion with you because it's kind of a polarizing opinion, if you haven't noticed, on people, how people think the Eagles do business here with the restructure. So we're going to get into all of that. Here's what's really cool, by the way. People are asking for it, and they're going to get it delivered to them. Q&A show did amazingly last week.
Oh, my God.
Right? I mean, it was I couldn't believe the response, the listenership on the pod and the YouTube. They were great, and the response was overwhelming. The numbers were great. Oh, and people were saying, hey, can you talk about Eagles wide receivers? Can you do something on wide receivers? So I pitched it to them, and they were all good with it. So the next show is going to be dedicated, and Wednesday at 6 a.m, it'll be out, to evaluating the Eagles wide receivers, and then they'll go through some of the draft coming up. And Adam, like the cool thing is Jason Avant, you know, I mean, he was a wide receiver. He was an assistant coach with the team this past year.
Yeah.
And Quentin, being a defensive back, knows how to pick out the flaws of wide receivers and how to defend them. It's literally the perfect combo for this topic.
You know, it's funny because when you and I talked about a month ago, we're like, okay, what's our next show? I really wanted Jason to be involved. I got to know him a little bit through American Flag Football League. We worked together 2 years ago, where Jason's team went pretty far in the playoffs. As a matter of fact, in that setting, Jason had to play offense and defense, by the way. Wow. You do in the Flag Football League, but his team actually went into overtime, and he just was. He'll tell you it takes so much out of you. I don't know that he could actually. I don't think he actually played on defense in the overtime game. I do remember that, talking to him about it on the sideline, but he is amazing route runner. Everybody knows, and I cannot wait to hear this, because the thing that I really wanted for our show, our latest player shows, is get somebody who knows receivers. And then, you know, you said, how about Quentin and Jason? I was like, yes.
Perfect.
As you just set it up, Jason is the receiver, and Quentin can watch tape and say, okay, this is what they're trying to do, where that's it, and whether this would beat him as a defensive back. So this is about as good as it gets. And the response, folks, I mean, let's call it like it is. It's some of the number. It's in our top 3 of most listened shows in the 3 years we've ever done this. It's incredible.
Yeah, it is incredible. So I look forward to even more shows from them in the future. But if you're wondering about Eagles wide receivers, make sure you check out this show again Wednesday at 6 a.m. on our Inside the Birds YouTube channel and our podcast platform. Now, also, Adam, Tuesday night, we're going to do our second Ask ITB live stream. So start getting your questions ready now. I repeat again that we're not in draft mode yet. So try to keep it to free agency, contracts, things like that, because that's more pertinent now. Doesn't mean we can't answer a broad-based draft question, but, you know, give us some time on the draft. We'll do that Tuesday night, 8 o'clock. So make sure you're looking, just be on our YouTube page or our Facebook page or our Twitter account at that time. And we'll get you the link.
Couple things on that. The reason why I don't get into the draft then is because free agency sets up the draft. We don't, asking a draft question, it's hard to answer because we don't know what they're going to do in free agency yet. Last year, we reported back at the Combine that they're going to be all in on Byron Jones, and they were. They made a significant offer because they thought they were going to be a pretty strong playoff team. Unfortunately, it didn't work out for them. They were 4-11-1. Mm-hmm. This year is completely different. They're in a transitional period. It's not that they won't get involved in free agency. They will. Everybody does. Sure. But it's not going to be, barring a major surprise, to the degree that they have in the past. It's a cap issue. It'll never be a wanting to. It's just they're in a very tough situation, which they haven't been before. I'm slightly surprised that they've been able to move a lot of money like they have so far. We're going to get into that. It's really interesting what they've done. But once we get through the first week of free agency, That's all I need to know. I'll know exactly what they're. I'll not know exactly, but I'm gonna have a pretty good idea of what they're gonna do in the draft in terms of positional targets. We'll know that, and we'll start debuting by the way on our Thursday show this week. Maybe 1 to 3 players that we think they might be in on free agency, but this one is a little bit harder to forecast because they're just so tight against the cap. And as Geoff said, not only do they have to be at 180, that's the projected number. They got to be under it because A, they're going to have to sign their rookies from the draft pick. So you need at least $5 million. You need to have at least $4 to $5 million left over under just to sign someone off the street during the season. Geoff, if you suffer much injuries, oh, by the way, the Eagles were incredibly hit by injuries last season. So they still have a lot of work to do, but so far they've been able to do some things I wasn't sure that they were going to do.
Right. Injuries last season, the season before, and the season before. That alone is why we need to talk about what they're doing with contracts specifically for older players, and we'll get into that. As I mentioned with the draft, we'll keep that kind of at a minimum for the live stream, but I'll say it again. We're bringing in Greg Cosell for a 6-week program, once a week, starting the last week of March, 6 shows once a week. It will be, when are we coming out with that? Tuesday morning, I believe, at 6 a.m.
Yes. That'll drop at our normal time, right? It'll be Tuesday the 30th with Greg Cosell from NFL Films. He is the best evaluator I've ever talked to in my life that does not work for an NFL team. And I like a lot of these so-called draft experts.
Right.
But Greg, it's like Greg and everybody else. It's like Kyle, it's like Pitts, the tight end, and everybody else, the tight end. He is, I've known him and Ron Jaworski since 2002, 2003, and I learned 75% of the player evaluations that I've been able to do on my own. I learned how to do it through those guys, and then obviously coaches that I know, and Geoff knows his people. We all like to learn from certain people, and Greg is very clinical the way that he does his evaluations. It's pretty fascinating to watch tape with him, Geoff. I did for like 10 years. Him and Jaws. It's something else because it gets to the point, it's so tedious and so annoying sometimes. They might go over the same play 20 times where I'm like, guys, could you move on already? I've seen enough of this play. but it's all on coaching tape, by the way. I kind of laugh at people doing analysis off TV tape. It cannot be done correctly. It just cannot. It's got to be on. Of course,
you need the all 22.
Yep.
So yeah, we look forward to bringing that. That'll round. I mean, we'll have our show. We'll have Q&A, which is going to be all sorts of professional and college analysis. And then, of course, Greg Cosell with the draft for 6 straight weeks is going to be about as good as we can give you right now as a small company that we are inside the Birds. But we look forward to continuing to expand and giving you more. Let's get into this part of the show here and get straight to the bigger news. There were a lot of restructures last week, Adam. Let's start with the first one, the Jason Kelce restructure. I find this one to be kind of more interesting than the others because I feel like we already knew the others were definitely going to be on the team this coming year. At the end of the year, you and I talked about Jason and how he always kind of ponders retirement and what they're going to do. And I'm pretty sure we felt that if he wanted to come back, that the number he was going to come back at, it was going to be a difficult decision for the Eagles. And what they've done is even more interesting than we would have imagined.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I had first heard 3 weeks ago that he's probably going to play. I tried to hint as much as I could on our show, but you have to see how this works because he was not going to play at $5.5 million. He did make the Pro Bowl. We could argue whether he should have made it or not. But if you grade 32 starting centers, even at 34, he does turn 33, he turns 34 in November, I think. If you just still graded 32 starting centers, folks, he's top 5 or top 7. So it's hard for Kelce, knowing that he made the Pro Bowl. By the way, he was voted and he was not a replacement. He actually earned it. And he also earned that $500,000 incentive for making it. It's hard for him not to want more. Now, Eagles didn't have to do that. But they're like, listen, if you want more money, we need to clear space here. We need to cut your cap number, which is $8.4 million. So they're going to save a little bit out of the cap. I don't have the final numbers. It'll be somewhere around $2 million plus that they're going to save under the cap. It might be a little bit more than that. It'll be at least $2 million under the cap. But as I reported on Friday, it is going to make a minimum of $9 million, no matter what happens.
Right
now. here we go. Dummy years, folks. They're coming.
Yeah, the dummy years. I think he already had one? Was his contract one that already had some dummy years?
Yeah,
Or
he actually had 3 of them. Yeah, he actually had 22 through 24 were dummy years. They're voidables, but they're dummy years. And here's the way it'll work, folks. If by a major surprise, it really wouldn't be a surprise if he comes back next year. The funny thing is when they did the previous extension, both sides thought, okay, he'll play 2 years. The third year, which is an option year, he won't play it, and it'll go away. He finished. You brought this up. He finished the season feeling pretty good. Other than that sprained elbow that he had, he's not a baseball player, so he's not gonna have surgery on it. He just lifts. He strengthens it. He lifts and makes it stronger, and he's good to go. He felt really good, I was told. So he wants to play. He lives in the area, as you know. He's probably going to retire here. He had a second child. What a week he had! If you saw his Instagram post,
yep,
he had a second child, a girl.
That's his second? I for some reason I thought
second.
it was his first. Okay,
yeah, it's second. Yeah, and
nice.
the name I think is Elliot with an E at the end.
Right.
Girl,
maybe it's pronounced
girl.
Elliot, just has an E at the end.
Right. Yeah, cool name. Anyway, so Jason's going to come back. He'll be the starting center. It buys them a year to figure out whether it would be Isaac Seumalo to replace him in 22, or they'll draft somebody. You don't draft, and the Eagles have a history of doing this. They're not going to draft, most likely would not draft a pure center, probably a hybrid player, a center guard, if it's not going to be Isaac. But they got this done, and this guy is going to retire as an Eagle. And quite frankly, I don't think he would have played anywhere else. If they couldn't agree to a deal, I think he just would have retired. But he felt really good. Now the other thing is when he's done playing, Geoff, I do believe he may go into coaching, whether it's high school, college, who knows. But from what I understand, he has some interest in coaching. I mean, he's a lot of interests. Coaching might be one of them, so we'll see what he does.
All right, so I feel like the Eagles were between a rock and a hard place here, Adam, because as you mentioned, his cap number was around, I think you said $8 million. And if they cut him, all of that signing bonus money that was on the books for next year, the year after, and the year after was going to drain into this year. And it would have been more than his cap number. So their idea is trying to get lower, not bigger. It would have been counterproductive for them to cut him and then maybe move on with, say, Amalu, Herbig, or somebody else. But to keep him on the team, but to keep him, Adam, he said, I'm only going to play if you give me more money. So they were kind of coerced into saying, okay, we'll give you more money. Now we have to continue to
I don't know if he said that.
out.
Yeah, but to be clear, I don't know if
you just said that. He said he wanted to play for more than $5.5 million.
Well, yeah, but my sense was he was not going to play at $5.5 million. I don't know that he specifically told them that, but I do know this.
All right. I get you.
He wasn't going to play at $5.5 million. That just was not.
Well, that's my point. So they had to give him more money than the $5.5 million, and then by doing that, they had to spread it out over future years, so it didn't really impact this year's cap.
Yeah.
So I'll say this. I love Jason Kelce. Think he's been a great Eagle. Everything you said about him and his career, peaks and valleys, has been more peaks is good. But the Eagles were once known and very as the smart franchise that knew just when to move on from a veteran who was 30 or 31 before it started to get too late. Jason Kelce's 33, right? I believe. And now he's going to have money on the books this year, next year, the year after, when I felt they had an opportunity to be able to replace him and get Seumalo in there, perhaps Herbig, perhaps draft. Now, they chose to bring him back. But how many times have we heard Howie Roseman say in the last 2 years, I'm getting a little bit too sentimental with my older players. I have to learn to move on, cut the cord. Well, here was a case where he could have. Sort of.
Well,
depending on if you retire.
No, I mean, they could have, but not gotten the cap relief. But here's why I wouldn't do it. The guy is durable as hell. It's one thing with Lane Johnson. We'll get to him when we talk about some other stuff that we got to look at. The guy hasn't missed a game since 2014.
Now, I can't say that indicates that at 33, 34, and 35 is going to be the same. I'm just, again,
as a performer, as a guy on the field, yes. I don't know if he's going to play like a guy's at 28, but the thing is he's dependable, whereas Lane Johnson has not played a full season since 15. Brandon Brooks, we'll get into him, though he didn't miss a game for 3 years, but he missed playoff games. He'd also torn his Achilles twice. There are other issues when you look at the other players, but this guy is so dependable, and he's also I agree with you on the sentimental part. I just get the feeling that you're looking at the situation for 3 weeks. Neither side wanted to do away with each other. I think from an Eagles standpoint, like you had said a couple times, maybe they just move Malo in there and just walk away. Okay, Isaac hasn't played much center in the National Football League. So who's your left guard? You look at it like that. Are you going to draft a guy? You're going to have to sign a guy? Like who?
Yeah, look, that's just the dilemma that every single NFL team has to deal with every single year with a variety of players. Nobody does it more probably than the New England Patriots. I get it. They had Tom Brady. It's easier. But, I mean, you'll see that with every team where you got to move on from a guy and hope that your replacement can fill in and do well. Center is a tough position. It's the brains of the offensive line, but it's not like, let's be fair, it's also not like replacing a lockdown corner or a left tackle. I mean, it's, you see teams kind of have a center here and a center there every few years. Again, I'm not trying to disparage Jason Kelce, but I'm trying to be fair and objective and hold Howie Roseman to his own words, because he has a tendency to say one thing and then at the end of the year, he's saying why he deviated from that and things. And I just feel like the whole, not just Howie, the whole team, Jeffrey, the whole philosophy is you used to be really good at knowing when a player was probably going to, even if a player had been dependable, like you say, healthy, like you say, when that's probably going to run out. And at 33 years old, I don't know how long you can quote unquote depend on Jason to stay healthy.
Hey, if Joe Banner was there, I know he got a bad rap for wanting to move on from players over 30 years old. And Joe's defended that he was talking about Dawkins and some other players who did play into their 30s.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is when you look at the situation, I don't know if they have his replacement on the roster. Now, I before we move on here, I still believe that this is a great time for them to draft his replacement. It doesn't have to be in the first round. You don't draft pure centers in the first round. You just don't do that, barring
some teams do. But yeah, it's not a
very rare. But very rarely is a guy pure center. Very rarely.
Well, there was a year like 2 years ago where 3, I think, went in the first round. Agnew, is it Agnew from Detroit? I can't remember.
Ragnall, you're right, but
Ragnall,
he's played two positions though. Frank Ragnall.
Yeah, that's true. The Bengals then also drafted the kid who hasn't
didn't
really
work at all. The kid from the Ohio State, who Price. Yeah.
Right. And then there was a third. I forget who, but you're right. Most of those guys were able to play multiple positions, but it's centers.
Right. Exactly. The point that I was making is simply this: it is so hard to find dependable centers. It's just so hard. I had a GM tell me over the last couple of years, he goes, if you graded 32 centers, again, you're going to be hard pressed to find 5 to 7 of them are really good. Some are average, slightly above average. And there's Kelce. Now, the snaps were an issue last season. That's a fact. We all know that. But other than the snaps, overall, he played fairly well. Your hope is that you get that guy in the draft. I can't imagine they're going to sign somebody in free agency who could actually take his job next year. How's that going to happen? I don't see that. You draft the guy.
Look, you draft a guy in whatever round, probably like you said, more likely for a center, 3rd, 4th, 5th.
Yeah.
And then you say, look, I got that guy, I got Malu, and I got Herbig, and I'm going to put them all through the ringer this spring and summer and see which one's the best. And maybe I get a different guy playing center, and I got a better left guard out of it with Driscoll. Who knows? That's for them to decide. Right. And look, I just want people to understand, I'm not anti-Jason Kelce. I understand why the team did what it did, but I have to hold the team to what it says. And what it says and what it does are often, sometimes, different things. So,
I know what you mean because Roseman admitted it in his last year at the Combine. You and I were there, and we're literally right in front of him. And he to his credit, at least he was willing to explain why he has trouble doing it. And you had brought up how the Bill Belichick walked away from anyone just about, except for Brady, but he did. Well, he did, but obviously at 41 years old. But I said this a month ago. I walk away from all of them. I want to get younger. I'm not worried about the fan. This is what I know about growing up here. As long as you have a plan and you don't keep trying to recycle the same plan, fans in the Philadelphia market will support you. If it's all going to be about the draft and you get the draft right, they don't care if you're 5 and 11. They just want to see special players drafted here, built through the goddamn draft. That's what they want.
Well, that's what the Eagles are going to absolutely need to do. They're going to need to hit on the draft because as we go forward here, we talk about some other players that they're going to give or have given restructures to. We've got defensive end Brandon Graham. right tackle Lane Johnson, and cornerback Darius Slay. And that is 3 guys who are over the age of 30. Or Slay might be 29.
Slay just turned 30.
That's right. He just turned 30. So much like what we said with Jason Kelce, it appeared all these guys, Adam, well, let's start with Graham and Johnson. They already had years left on their contract with a lot of guaranteed money spread out over several years before the restructures, right? I think with Graham, it's like 3 or 4, and Lane Johnson, maybe 4 years.
Brandon doesn't have any guaranteed money left in his contract, but he did. What Geoff's saying is that they took his base salary and they converted, they converted a lot of it last year. Their last restructure with Brandon was at the end of the 19th season, right before the calendar changed, and they converted his $8.5 million to a guaranteed option bonus. And now you got to 21, which is the last year of his deal. Yeah, the $13 million is not guaranteed. And our friend Derek Gunn reported it that it was in the works. I'm fascinated to see how much of his base salary do they convert. Do they take 8 million, 5 million, 10 million, all 13 million? Because what you're doing is are they going to do the normal simple restructure, take that base salary and convert it into a signing bonus? Because he's going to be on the roster anyway this year. So converting it to a signing bonus, making it signing bonuses are fully guaranteed. It doesn't really matter because he's going to be on the roster this season. But the problem is that Geoff's talking about this. You're pushing dummy years and cap down the line. Now, what I do believe is what other teams believe. The cap, and we'll talk, there's a great quote from Mike Mayock on this, but there is a strong belief when the TV deals get done that 22, 23, 24, and 25, massive increases in the cap. They better be right, because if there's not, they got a major problem on their hands.
Well, there is supposed to be at least 1 and maybe 2 TV deals that should help increase the cap. And of course, as we get back to normal, and by the way, I mean, we're really at the week where it's a 1 year, I think, is it 1 year? Did it start yet? Like where the shutdowns began that first week of March? I remember we got back from the combine a couple of days into March, and then like it seemed like 4 or 5 days later, everything started shutting down.
Wow. Yeah. You mean comparatively? Yeah. It is unbelievable. Yeah. It's been a year. Holy smokes.
Yeah. Wow. So that's unbelievable to think of. But the point I was trying to make was, all right, yes, I do think the cap will jump. And I do think that any one individual player's dead money in any of those years can be withstood, even if it's a high cap. Now, take Darius Slay, right? Before the restructure, he was on the books, and I wrote about this on InsideTheBirds.com, so check it out, because I try to put this all in perspective. He was on the books last year for like $6 million, this year for $7 million, which is a steal. He's going to play at a $7 million cap number in 2020, Adam.
Actually, no, what happened was his base salary in 2020 was $1.05 million.
Right, but I'm just doing
what
cap
happened
number.
I'm sorry?
I was doing cap number.
Oh, yeah. No, it's right. His cap was only $4.3 million last season. However,
thought it was longer. Okay.
Massive number this season. Well, massive. It's pretty strong. It's $15.75 million.
Right.
Now with restructure, they'll lower it because his base salary is $12 million, which is fully guaranteed, by the way. So they'll lower it. I'm fascinated to see how much they're going to lower it by. I think the NFL Network report said they're going to save $9 million, which means that they'll drop it somewhere around $3 million.
So tell me what his cap number is before this restructure was supposed to be for next year, 2020.
Massive number. Go ahead.
I'm asking you.
$19.75 million before the restructure.
Before the restructure.
Yeah.
So I don't know how you do a restructure without that number raising, because that's a future year.
Of course.
2022. All right.
Right.
So you tell me this. What happens if Darius Slay this year in 2021 at the age of 30 starts to show some decline? Now, I mean, he already started to show a little bit last year. He struggled with Metcalf, struggled with Devontae Adams, struggled with Claypool. I don't think it's a bad year. I'm not overreacting to that. I think he played well against McLaurin, played fairly well against Darius Slayton, and some other wide receivers. So it was not a disastrous year by any means. But this coming year, 2021, he is a little bit older. If he gets hurt, if he declines, the next year after that, 2022, as you just said, he's going to be on the books for a cap number that exceeds 22 million. It's probably going to go up after this restructure.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
So
And here's
what do you do?
Yeah. Well, you know, they only have one option, is to restructure again next year, which would his base salary is 16 million for 22, unless they do something with it. In 23, the final year of his deal is 17 million. Now, 22 and 23, there's no guaranteed money. I mentioned this a couple shows ago. They keep with these restructures, these cap numbers for a lot of veterans are going to be the 20 million plus. There's going to be a bunch of them. They'll get away with it, Geoff, if they don't retire or have to cut them. But as you astutely point out, if these guys regress, they keep getting hurt, and they feel like, we just can't keep this guy on the team, they're going to get zapped with dead money. It's going to be a problem. So you gotta.
Well, I see it even differently. Well, that too, but Adam, I see it like they leave themselves open. Again, if you do it for one guy, okay. If you do it for four guys now, Graham, Slay, Lane Johnson, and Kelce, who are all over 30, what you leave yourself is open to any one of those or two of those guys, and hopefully not all three or four. But what if you have an Alshon Jeffrey-like situation where not only does their play regress, but they get hurt significantly? They have to miss the last half of the year, and that makes it impossible to cut or trade them without having to absorb the full value of it. So then everybody says, but the cap goes up, the cap goes up. Okay, but that's four guys that you're doing it to who are all either aging or coming off major injury or both. And so,
what you're saying
so it's not even about like whether or not they'll be able to take the hit. With the rising cap, they will, but you saw what happened with Alshon. He came back and they played him for no reason other than they owed him that money. They played him. Well, now you got 4 or 5 guys who theoretically you may be like, they're not what I want them to be. They're not even good enough to play anymore, but they're all making 18, 19, 20 million in cap. So I got to put them out on the field. That's the only concern that I have.
Right. Your concern is clear. If they have 3 or 4 guys that they feel like they need to cut because they completely regressed, or a couple guys have such bad injuries, they don't think they'll ever play at the same level. They're not going to be able to cut them because the acceleration to the cap is so significant because of the dummy years. It's just going to be very, very difficult. I mean, what Roseman's done here is the credit card spending. He's like the Saints have done the same thing, but their situation is way worse than the Eagles. Way worse. That if you rank the teams with the biggest cap problems, it's the Saints, and then it drops off. You can make an argument the Eagles are the number 2 team, but they've done a lot of work on it. Now, again, there's some gambles here, so I don't want to take up the whole show doing the cap stuff because this could get boring.
I just wanted to make that overriding point that it works 2 ways. You may have to absorb a lot of dead money, which I don't know how Jeffrey Lurie would feel about that, but I mean, he has to be signing off on these. And then the second thing is, if they are uncuttable or untradeable because of injury like Alshon, then what do you do? Are you going to have him just sit there on the bench with $20 million cap? No, you're going to try to play him and say, which is fine this year when you're rebuilding, but it's not in year 2 and year 3. And by the way, some of these caps, as you mentioned with Lane, I think, and Brandon, they go into 22, 23. If Jalen Hurts is any good, you're going to want to give him a real quarterback extension at some point. You want to give Goddard an extension. Miles Sanders after next year will be up for an extension. So everybody talks about but the cap's getting big, Yeah, well, you need the money for the big cap. I mean, you have other players that you'd like to give money to because they're good. So it just puts it's a bind. And look, I think this has to be noted. I want to be fair. Howie Roseman did not have a single choice, right? Because any of these guys we talked about, if he just decided to cut, they're owed so much money down the road from their bonuses and restructures that it would have been accelerated into this year. And again, that's counterproductive. He's trying to get lower, not have all of this money drained into the cap this year. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. The 2 issues complicating this situation is the cap not as high. It's the pandemic, the cap $30 to $40 million lower than it should have been. Okay, with new TV deals, it really should be 215 to 220 million this season. Right now, we're working on 180. Probably Joe Banner thinks it's going to be a little bit. We had him on NFL Radio with us on Saturday, and he thinks it's going to be a little bit higher than 180, but it's still significantly lower than it should be in a normal year. And then, you've got this issue with we didn't mention it. We Scheffler should talk about it. The Wentz deal is going to kick in on March 17th at 4 p.m. Eastern. The question is, are they going to designate it post June 1, or are they going to take the full $33.8 million? I don't know that yet. But they got to account for it one way or the other. It's
I would take the
worst year, as
33.
you outlined. It's the worst year to have all these issues.
I would take it this year while you still have a decent you've got a pretty decent offensive line and defensive line. So you can start to build around Jalen Hurts if that's your guy, or the new quarterback, if there's a new quarterback. I would do that, and then make Malik and Deshaun Alshon and Malik. I mean the post June 1st, because I wouldn't want Carson's mega hit to be spread over 2 years. I would just get it over with now, so that next year you're back in the clear. Unfortunately, you just hope that money next year isn't a couple other guys that equal $33 million.
Oh, they got to cut. Yeah, that's what you're saying. Yeah. You're right, man. I get what you're saying. Saying. There's a major roll of the dice here. This is what happens when you restructure deals. Boy, the Cowboys used to do this years ago. Mm-hmm. And the problem is, when guys retire early, you get that bonus acceleration. It's not good, and you got to be careful. So we'll see what happens.
Definitely. All right. Other news: the punter Cam Johnson, who had a really nice year, but he was under the he could have been under the RFA tag, restricted free agent. Excuse me. But that was like $2.2 million, and the Eagles decided that they were not going to be in the business of having a punter for $2.2 million. Now they can still bring him back if he can't do better in free agency, but now he's anybody's bidder, though, Adam. Anybody can sign Cam Johnson. And he
right. Yeah. So they actually, I think we put this out a year ago on our show. They were at the time they were working on the, I guess it was 2 years ago, Jake Elliott extension. They were talking to Cam Johnston, and they, a year ago or so, maybe a little bit over a year ago, could not agree to a deal with him. So here we are a year later, and they didn't tender him as a restricted free agent. So, yeah, I mean, he could leave. I mean, he can't do anything until March 17th. And on March 15th, his agents could start talking to other teams about him legally, as it were. But the fact of the matter is, they can bring him back. It's not the end all be all when we don't tender a player. It's, had he been an exclusive rights free agent, that's a different story. You don't not tender an exclusive rights free agent unless you think the guy stinks. It just doesn't happen. As an RFA, there are instances, and this is one of them, where the team might have some interest in bringing them back. And by the way, Thomas Morstead's out there, the Saints punter. That was a surprise. Like, there've been literally no surprise cuts, folks. The way it works in the National Football League is teams simply do not cut players they want. No matter what you think, they will tell you privately, we don't cut players we want back.
It's been a while, yeah.
With an asterisk. Right. This year is different.
Yeah,
and we're going to get to something Mike Mayock said very interesting this past week about that. But yeah, so we'll see. Oh, by the way, the Eagles signed this. They have a punter to a future contract. Aaron Sipas, he's an Australian rules punter who was with the Lions in camp last year. Nice. He's Australian. He's older. He's in his late 20s. He played at Auburn collegiately, but I have no idea if this guy's any good. I'm not saying he would be the replacement for Johnson if Johnson doesn't come back, but we should mention we never talked about him before. He's on the roster.
All right, there you go. So maybe an in-house replacement. Boy, isn't Cam Johnston also Australian? I know he went to Ohio State, but is he not Australian? I thought he was.
Yeah, I think he is. Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
Do you remember Saverio Roca?
Sav Rocca, yeah.
Yeah. So that's pretty interesting. All right. Let us give a shout out to our friends at PHLSportsNation.com, enhancing the fans' experience with all of their coverage and content of the Philadelphia professional sports teams. You know who they are. You can find them on Twitter at PHLSportsNation, or just head on over to the website, PHLSportsNation.com. And we'll pause real quick for another word from our great sponsors, including our friends at Sky Motor Cars. All right, Adam. So let's go through the offensive line a little bit now that we know that Jason Kelce will be back, and of course the restructure with Lane Johnson, which he was going to be back anyway. But Let's go through it. So I was going to start at left tackle, but I don't want to do that.
Okay. Right.
Let's go with what we know. Jason Kelce is going to be the center.
Yep.
Isaac Seumalo will be the left guard.
Correct.
All right. The right guard will be Brandon Brooks, I have to think, right?
Oh, yeah. They can't cut the guy. They owe him. They owe him $10 million, just over $10 million fully guaranteed, so they can't walk away from the contract. Brandon has done a good job with his rehab. Fully expect him back. Mm-hmm. Fortunately, he didn't play last season towards Achilles. That's why Jason Peters just came back. They weren't going to bring Peters back, but they didn't have many options after Brooks towards Achilles.
Right.
It's an interesting situation. He didn't miss a game in the regular season for 3 straight seasons, 17 through 19.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, he got hurt in that playoff game. What, against the Saints, was it?
It was the Saints, yeah.
And
God, that feels like forever.
And he's had a couple of freak injuries. I mean, it's just kind of weird, but terrific football player. We'll see after this season what they do, but this year they're kind of locked in. Mm-hmm. Here's the thing, though, when you start right to left, Lane Johnson turns 31 in May. He's coming off of significant ankle surgery, as we know.
Mm-hmm.
He's not played a full season since 2015. Some of it due to injury, some of it, as you know, due to suspension.
Right.
We know that we just mentioned Brandon Brooks, who turns 32 in August. Kelce turns 34 in November. 3 guys have missed time. Kelce hasn't missed time since 14, but 3 guys over 30 or older. You get concerned about that. That this is a little bit of a gamble. Look, on paper, again, it's on paper, folks. People came at me on Friday with what I'd said, and I'll just explain what I meant. On paper, this is a pretty good unit, okay? I get it, folks. Odds are against it. They're going to play together for 16 games. I get it, obviously. But I'm just saying the talent level is there. But logically, it's not going to happen with guys. I mean, think about it, Geoff. Seumalo had a significant knee sprain. He missed 7 games. Brandon Brooks missed the entire season last year. Lane Johnson coming off significant ankle surgery. Kelce, as you said earlier, you can't just think he's going to be the same player, but he is durable. But there are a lot of questions here.
There are a lot of questions. The best thing this team can do is have depth. And they've got some – well, let's talk about it. Well, because left tackle obviously is somewhat of a competition. You and I believe Jordan Mailata, it's his job to lose, correct? You believe that?
Oh, 100%. He'll be the left tackle, barring a pretty significant surprise. I mean, I understand Diller will be healthy, but the fact of the matter is, it's interesting that Mailata is younger than Dillard.
I know. How about that? That is amazing.
But Mailata was so dominant at times. It's kind of one of these things where you go, oh, my goodness gracious, we need to see more of this.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Dillard has tremendous athleticism, but he's not the physical specimen that Mailata is, and Mailata's upside's bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And again,
like I said, you wish you could combine Mailata's just immenseness and his mentality with Dillard's footwork in pass protection and put them together, and it would be like Jason Peters, right? It would be like the perfect left tackle.
Yeah, so we'll see. Again, we expect Mailata to be the left tackle. Seumalo's back at left guard. Really solid football player. He's a step below the Pro Bowl level. He's just dependable.
Right.
Does a good job. He's not perfect, folks. He's not a Pro Bowler, so every once in a while he's gonna have a game where you scratch your head. But overall, he's a solid football player.
Definitely.
If you just grade the line on talent, this is really a gifted line. But because of their injury history, specifically with Brooks and Johnson, you just can't assume that they're going to play 16 games. And then, as you were talking about, is Jack Driscoll in your mind, Geoff? Is he the swing guard tackle, right tackle?
No, he certainly could be. Here's the thing that we can't predict. Let's say Jordan Mailata is your left tackle. Andre Dillard, I think, would be a great backup tackle to have, and you can then use Driscoll as a guard / tackle. I know how Howie Roseman thinks. Dillard's a former first-round pick. If he doesn't win the job, do I think Howie Roseman would probably trade him and get whatever he can get back? Probably. I personally would just hold on to him. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. I think it's good to have a backup who has talent. I would cross-train him to try to play the right tackle while he's on the bench and see if you can, then have him become your swing tackle. But I'm smart enough to know, or I should say, I've covered the team long enough to know that if he doesn't beat out Mailata, Howie will probably trade him.
Question.
And that would leave Driscoll and Herbig to me as your top two backups, and then whoever they might draft this year. And I do believe they'll probably draft on the offensive line.
What would you take if you were to trade Dillard? What would you take for him in a draft pick?
I'd probably take a 3 or higher. I mean, I'm not getting a 1, obviously. I'm probably not getting a 2. I don't think I would take a 4. I'd rather have the back. Because this team has aging offensive linemen, I'm going to value his depth more than I'm going to value a 4th round pick in this situation.
I agree with you. I would not take any lower than a 3rd. I'd want a 3 that could be a 2 if he becomes a left tackle for a team. You put parameters on it. If he starts this amount of games, let's say he starts 14 games in 21, I want a 22 second round pick for him. That I would do in a heartbeat. Now, getting back to your point, you make a really good point here. If you trade Dillard, who's your backup left tackle?
There you go. I don't know. You don't really have one.
No.
That's why I would keep him. That's why I would.
Can't go Matt Pryor. Cannot go Matt Pryor. Sorry.
No, I don't think Matt Pryor should be back with the team. So you've got your starting 5 that we mentioned. Dillard could be a 6th, and Driscoll could be a 7th. Herbig can be an 8th. And normally, I mean, they've only kept 8 or 9 the last few years. So if you want that 9, could be a road. I mean, it could be Jariga. It could be somebody that they draft this year. Prince. Oh no, they don't have Prince Tego Winogo anymore, do they? That's right.
I think he's with the Chiefs.
The Chiefs.
Yeah.
No, then they cut. No, yeah, they cut him, but then they re-signed him, I think, to the practice squad.
Yeah, I think he's back there. I think he's signed a reserve future with them. Yeah.
Right. Man, it's amazing how many guys from last year's draft got poached. Really, I mean, Casey Toohill got poached. Winogo's now poached. Wasn't there another guy that they drafted?
Well, yeah, but no, Toohill was claimed off waivers, right?
That's what I mean by poached. I just mean they tried to clear him through waivers, bring him back, but it didn't work.
Oh, and the kid Togiai.
Noah Togiai, yeah.
Well, that was controversy. Talk about an undrafted free agent controversy. That was hilarious, man.
Yeah.
That took up like 20. Folks, if you're new to our show, that must have taken up 15 minutes on one show. We were like so blown away because we had heard how well he did in training camp, and they made the bad mistake of cutting the guy. When I say it's a mistake, he could have been that future backup for Goddard, but hey, he's now with the Colts.
Definitely. All right. So as we move on from the offensive line, Adam, let's talk. The Eagles are getting closer, obviously, with the moves that they made. We don't have the exact numbers now. They're getting closer to being cap compliant. Still have a little ways to go. We know that the biggest way for them to really resolve this issue going forward, what's left, is to do something with Derek Barnett. And you got to believe that something can be worked out. What's his cap number on the 5th-year option? $10.05 million?
Correct.
Right?
His salary, his salary is his cap number. Yes, $10.051 million.
Sure.
Absolutely could shave off $4 to $5 million off of that easily. Extend his contract. I was talking to someone from another team who this team was. It called the Eagles at the trade deadline just to see what if he was available, and he was not. They liked Barnett, this one team, just because they liked his athleticism. Not a great athlete, but they thought he could be a solid starter for the next 5 to 6 years. Not going to be a Pro Bowler. Sort of below that. Definitely looked at his injury history. We're a little bit concerned about that. And you and I outlined last summer that he has issues sometimes keeping his weight up for whatever reason.
Right.
But they liked him. This guy explained to me recently that the guy definitely is a starter. He convinced me that, listen, geez, if you explain it this way, the Eagles should extend his contract. But I wouldn't go crazy with the I wouldn't give him big money. I would not.
3 years, $30 million, 12 guaranteed, 15 guaranteed?
Yeah, I would not go more than $12 million. I don't know what the comps are on him. You'd have to figure out who he's comparable to, what kind of contract comparable to.
Right.
But he's been a little bit above average, nothing better than that. He's not, let's put it this way, though. Would you not agree he's not been the player they probably thought they were drafting?
Well, I feel like when he plays, he is, but the problem is that he's been hurt too much. Is that fair?
Well, I thought, okay, guys,
what's he got, 30 sacks in 48 games, I think?
But if you
would like to see more.
Yeah, it's not just sacks or individual plays. I'm talking, is he a difference maker?
No, you're right, because some games he is, right? And then some games he just kind of like,
well,
you don't see him. Yeah,
he's got that bendy. We've talked about those ankles. So he has 3 to 5 games a season where, oh boy, he looks like a first rounder. Then the other games, he's like, you don't see much from him.
Right. Do remember though,
he's young. He's only 24. That's why it's hard to walk away from that player. But he needs to get better. You have to ask yourself this question: can he get much better? I don't know.
Right. No, we'll see if the new coaching staff maybe has a little juice with the defensive lineman like Schwartz did. I was going to say, that was not a really strong draft for pass rushers. I remember there was Barnett, there was Charles Harris, who has been worse than Barnett by a mile. There was Tack McKinley, who's on his second or third team already, right?
Atlanta, Oakland. Where else is he?
I thought Oakland released him though, so isn't he? Won't he be?
He's somewhere else. He's definitely on a roster. Anyway, yeah, he's been he's been a bust. Sure. Right. Well, and look, I mean, the Eagles they didn't have to take a pass rusher. They could have taken Marlon Humphrey, who went like 2 picks later. But yeah, he's a stud. Yeah, he's a stud.
He is a stud. But anyway, as you're saying, he's on the books for $10 million right now. He will not be on the books for $10 million by the time they're done with his extension. It might be half that, 5-4.
He should be getting an extension. I would be very surprised if he doesn't.
Right.
Because if you looked away from him, you would trade him. You're not going to cut him. You would trade him.
Who's going to take that? I mean, they tried to do that with Aguilar.
But no, what it is that team would do the extension with him. They wouldn't take that on the $10 million. I wouldn't think they would just extend the new team would extend his contract. But let's say, for argument's sake, before we move on here, if you traded him, what's your recourse here? Well, Josh Sweat is a terrific third end. He's not, because of that leg that he injured in high school. He's not a 50 snap a game guy. He's just not. We know that. We've talked about this for 3 years. He's somewhere you could probably push 40 snaps if you absolutely had to have him doing that every game. You want to be careful. That leg gets tired. He drags it. The tape shows that he drags it every once in a while. But he's come a long way. By the way, he's come a long way from where he was as a rookie.
Sure. By the way, that trade, if they were to do that, would have to be, unless they were able to get compliant without touching his contract, that you would think that trade would have to come between now and March 17th, right?
Yeah, because exactly, because you want to get it off. The Eagles if they were going to trade him, they want that $10 million off his cap, off the cap. That's why, as you said, whether it's an extension or a trade, if the Eagles keep him and extend him, you want that thing's got to be done before the 17th. Absolutely, you want to get that $10 million off that cap number off the roster, one way or the other.
Right. All right. So we talked about Malik Jackson and Alshon Jeffrey. They're going to be released. Those will probably, we'll see, be the post June 1 cuts, right? I mean, that they have a good chance of being the
you only get 2 of them. Yeah, you only get 2 designations. Right.
What about Isaac Seumalo and Fletcher Cox? Do you think that there's any way to get them restructured? When you restructure Seumalo because he's younger and still has many years,
he would be perfect to do. He would be perfect to do because he's got a low base salary of just $4 million. His cap number is really manageable at $5.416 million. Good football player out of the 16 draft. Absolutely. If they were to restructure somebody or extend, he did have it extended a couple years ago.
He did, yeah.
But to me, I would do this in a heartbeat. He's a perfect guy. Like you could just lower to $1 million if you want. Now, they did restructure his contract. He signed an extension in 19, and at the end of 19 they restructured it.
Of course they did.
Yeah, it's funny.
Is there anybody that haven't restructured?
I'm sorry. Yeah, it's funny. But the veterans, God,
anyone who's not on a rookie deal.
That's a great question. I know a couple players over the years I was told turn them down. They just didn't want to do it for whatever reason. This happens with every NFL team. Not everyone's going to say yes.
Right.
But yeah, it's a funny thing that you said because quite frankly, most have. Now, on Fletcher Cox, by the way, not that it matters. Seumalo's not going anywhere, but he's got his base salary becomes fully guaranteed on March 19th. He's going to be here anyway, so it's a non-factor. But he would be a great guy to extend. And then Fletcher Cox, he's got a $1 million roster bonus due also on March 19th. Not that matters; they're going to pay it. I just can't see him getting restructured. Here's why. It's just ridiculous. He's got quarterback cap numbers. His cap number this season is just under $24 million. His cap number in 22, the last year of his deal, is also just under $24 million. It's basically 23.9 million. 23 were void. He's got a dummy year, but you can't raise his 22 number any bigger than it is. You can't do that.
Well, I mean, they raised Slay's number, and that was 19. So
right, what are you going to raise it to 27 million or 28 million? His cap number for 22. I mean,
well, I mean, then you just keep restructuring it, right? That's what people say.
I mean, that's all you can do, and you know, when you do this stuff, it's Eagles aren't the only team that's doing this. You better be right with the rises in the cap.
Yeah,
they're going to be significant because if look, these TV deals are happening, they're clearly going to go up pretty big in 22. I don't know if it's going to be 230 million. I don't know if the cap's going to rise 30 million. It may only rise 15 million. Who the hell knows?
Right. And you better hope they stay healthy so that when you want to move on, you can move on. So, man, you're right. The Eagles aren't the only team doing this, but I would have to think that they are the only team that potentially could have 5 or 6 players over 30 that have all been restructured in the last year or two. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but that's a lot of players they're going to have.
Well, the Saints just did Demario Davis, who's in his 30s, Cam Jordan, who's in his 30s. They also, now he's younger, David Onyemata. They restructured.
No, that was just an extension. That he was a free agent last year.
No. They did a restructure
already.
Yeah, because he did a. Remember, he did a new deal last year. He came back last March. Yep, they restructured him about a week ago. Yeah, I'm looking at their contracts. They did him. They have some decisions to make on Janoris Jenkins. They got to take a look at his contract, whether he's playing well enough. They have so much to do. You know, they did one of the all-time things, which I thought was hilarious. We rarely see this. They cut Jared Cook, he was going to be unrestricted anyway. They just cut him before his contract expired. I don't know why they did that. That was bizarre to me, but so there you go.
Why would the Eagles, though, restructure guys like Slay and Graham before? Well, again, you're right. Not everybody agrees to it, but you would have thought Sayamalu and Hargrave would make more sense because they're also guys who have big back end cap numbers that are younger, though. You expect them to still be on a team in 3 or 4 years.
Right. So here are the other things they can do. Let's get into that. Geoff, I strongly believe that Zach Ertz will be traded by the 17th. They're going to find somebody to take his contract. The question for that team is, do you let him play it at just over $8 million? Do you restructure it? Do you extend it? That's for that team to decide. But he still is a reliable pass catcher. We could debate whether he's the same player. You know, he's 30. He's probably not the same player. But you have to decide if you're taking his contract, what do you think he could be over the next couple of years? But one way or the other, they'll save over $8 million if they move him. Marquise Goodwin, he's not playing at that 4.45 cap number, 3.95 base salary, no chance. They should be able to get him at the veteran minimum. So you could save there over $3 million. Lane Johnson, we talked about it. Our friend Derek Gunn reported that they're in the process of trying to restructure his contract. We talked about Isaac Seumalo earlier. I love your point about Javon Hargrave. His base salary of $12.275 million is fully guaranteed. His cap number is $15.2 million. You have to assume, because he's a relatively young guy, he'll be with the team for many years. He's a perfect guy to restructure. Get that cap number under $10 million, save more there. We talked about Derek Barnett. We talked about Graham. So they could save here $25 to $30 million in cap. Ertz, Goodwin, Lane Johnson, Hargrave, Barnett, Graham, they could shave easily 25 to 30 million off with restructures and extensions here, one way or the other, and trades obviously with trade with Ertz. So they can do this, Geoff. They absolutely can do this.
Sure. I wanted to get into though what Mike Mayock said because it's all pertinent. First, I want to remind everybody: download the top-rated DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use that promo code ITB to get all your sign-up bonuses using that promo code, again, ITB. So if you download the top-rated DraftKings Sportsbook app, you use the promo code ITB, you get fantastic sign-up bonuses. I don't know what you're waiting for, so make sure you do that right now. The top-rated DraftKings Sportsbook app, download it. All right, so Mike Mayock kind of laid this thing out fairly clearly. I'll let you read what he said because it really kind of spells out the situation.
Yeah. So this past week, a bunch of GMs are having their combine media get together virtually because, this last week would have been the combine week. So what Mike said and he was asked about the cap because by the way, they have a cap issue. They typically are really good with a cap, but they have an issue. So, quote, here's what Mike said. If you go back 2 years and say where the cap was going to be coming this season, the answer would have been plus or minus $225 million. Now we're looking at a cap of $180 million today. So it's simple math. The reality is every team in the league is going through conversations like never before as far as what is the best composition of your locker room? Where do we have to make moves? How do we make these moves? And to me, it all just goes back to you have to be really good in the draft. And you have to build your team for the draft. We have to be smarter in free agency, better in free agency, and we have to complement that with a really solid draft. This is, by the way, what I've been talking about, end quote. This is what I've been talking about. You cannot build your team through free agency. The Raiders last year spent crazy money at linebacker. They made a lot of mistakes last free agency, particularly at linebacker. They signed the kid from Corey Littleton, $12 million a year. Okay. Then they also signed Nick Kwiatkowski from the Bears, about $7+ million. So just under $20 million, 2 linebackers. It's just not a way you build your roster. It's not Mike's fault. It's Gruden has personnel control. You can't do that. Trent Brown, that contract's bad. When they chased him a couple years ago, he's unfortunately missed a lot of time. Mm-hmm. He can be dominant at times, but they got to make a decision on his contract. So the Raiders have a cap issue. They might be one of those few teams that might have to cut some players that they really don't want to cut if they can't get these guys to restructure. And by the way, they do a really good job of structure. They do pay as you go. They don't do signing bonuses. They do year to year. They do fully guaranteed base salaries. They don't do signing bonuses.
Right.
So
right.
That's really the way to go. But the Eagles do it a different way.
Yeah. So that's interesting because Andrew Brandt, who we've had on ITB TV, who has worked alongside Howie as a contract advisor in the
did it 09.
Eagles, right, for 09. He recently, as you know, he writes for a column for SI.com, and he did this column on debunking myths about the salary cap. And I honestly think what he wrote was not intended to be a personal shot at Howie. I'm fairly sure they're friends, but they definitely have different philosophies on the cap based on their experiences. Howie has been able, through Jeffrey Lurie, to use this kind of cap manipulation where you push the money down the road. Obviously, Jeffrey Lurie has to sign off on that. When Andrew was in charge of contracts for the Packers, he wrote that he was given the mandate that you are a pay-as-you-go type team, meaning the cash is going to match the cap every single year. You get it, you go for it. In fact, he brought up a joke about how he would be good enough to be under the cap by several $1 million and have a good team, but because that's all you get in any given year, he would have to write in crazy incentives. Like I think one was for Doug Peterson, right? If you throw like 30 touchdowns, I'm going to give you, $20 million in an incentive. And of course that it would never happen. So you would get to carry that over
cap credit,
from year to year. But I just think it's interesting because everybody thinks that the Eagles are either doing it the right way or doing it the wrong way. And I'd like to think that we all live in a world where two things can be true at once. The way Howie does it and the Eagles do it has been beneficial up until this year with COVID. Some people say you shouldn't be able to use COVID as an excuse. Others say, how can you see it coming? I'm not going to judge that because, when you do business, you just, sometimes unexpected things happen. So, but I understand that for a long time, the Eagles were able to have very talented players, especially along the offensive line, Adam, right? They were able to spend more money than maybe most because they were giving those prorated bonuses out. But I just think it's interesting that these two guys who work together have such opposite philosophies. And I think Andrew made a fair point. And again, I don't think it's a shot at Howie, but it stood out to me. He said that
I would just say that.
Let me tell you the point he made.
Okay.
He said that people say that you're a genius if you can manipulate the cap by pushing money forward and forward and forward. And he said, I disagree. He said, in this day and age, I think you're a genius if you can field a competitive team by matching cap to cash every year, by having one hard cap that you stick to year after year after year. And I think that's I think that's pretty hard. It's a fair point on his part.
Yeah. Joe Banner just told us this on NFL radio. He actually said that. He said he wanted to keep the rises in the cap numbers flat and to match cash. Now, Andrew thinks logically, a lot of teams because the pressure to win, they get it, but they're not willing to do that. Now, the Seahawks, they have a unique structure. They do a massive signing bonus.
Right.
The first year, fully guaranteed base salary. The next year, year after that, rolling guarantees, which means that I call them fake guarantees. These injury guarantees mean absolutely nothing. What they do mean they're placeholders. If you're on the roster on a certain date, and what they do as a give back to the agents, they do it like 5 days after the Super Bowl. Your base salary that given year will be fully guaranteed, but they're not fully guaranteeing it signing. That's what. And ironically, where do you think that John Schneider came from? The Packers, and he worked with Andy Brandt. There you go.
Brandt, exactly. Yeah, you can find those trees everywhere, right?
the cap trees.
The cap trees. Well, like Fitterer now is the GM in Carolina, right? Scott Fitterer, who came from Seattle.
Yeah, so that's a great point.
John Schneider. So we'll have to see how they do contracts.
Yeah, and league source did tell me that not Seattle, Carolina's probably going to go towards the pay-as-you-go system. So it's funny you bring that up, and I do wonder, before we move on here, I do wonder down the road, it won't be this year, obviously, because they have this cap issue. But if the cap comes in super duper high in 22 and 23, I do wonder if Roseman will stop doing these restructures and not feeling the pressure to win. Because, the owner talked about, Jeffrey Lurie talked about whenever he did his press briefing, where he didn't really take questions, but he said the team's in transition. I do wonder if Lurie will tell not only Roseman, but the other personnel people, hey, listen, let's just we had to do what we had to do this year. Let's get younger. You don't have the pressure to win. Just draft well. Let's stop restructuring. I don't even know if Jeffrey understands contracts at all. I don't know what he knows and doesn't know. You were mentioning it earlier, whether maybe Jeffrey will understand this. I don't know that he does. Because
I mean, he's so involved, it would be hard for me to. Like if you're Jeffrey, right, and you're $70 million over the cap, and you've already said this is a 1-year phenomenon,
right?
You have to, I would think, know why it's a 1-year phenomenon, because Howie has powwowed with you and said, here's what we're going to do to get out from underneath the cap. I mean, and plus they've been doing this for years now. It's just that they used to do it with younger players, not 30-year-olds.
And it's hard, right? It's hard to argue. You were saying this a couple minutes ago. It's hard to argue with that success. But as I said, last year at this time, after the Jeffrey situation, you can do it, okay? You can do it,
right?
But if you miss on one, you got a problem. And the Jeffrey one, they would have gotten away with it if we had a normal year without the pandemic. I mean, as you said, who could have planned for this? But now that you had to do a massive amount of restructuring, you outlined that very well early in the show, about probably half an hour ago. If you have 4 or 5 guys, you got to move on for over a 2-year period. The cap charges are going to be significant because all that acceleration. So you got to be careful. Definitely.
We will see. This is one of where I truly say I welcome everybody's opinion. You can hate it. You can tell me it's a great idea, but the ultimately time will tell. If 2 or 3 years from now, we're talking about guys who are old and hurt and you can't move on from them without taking on big cap hits, and you were hoping to be able to trade them, and it becomes a problem with how you build the team. Honestly, if that happens, we'll probably be talking about a whole new regime. So who knows? But Howie had I do want to reiterate, I don't know what other choice Howie had to make to clear that much money other than restructure. I don't know if there was another solution on his point.
Yeah. And the thing is, if they would have taken the route and pulled a Patriots, just cut a bunch of older players, the cap charges wouldn't significant. And then the other question is, are you willing to field a team that's almost not competitive?
Right.
And be an expansion team because quite frankly, if you move on from a bunch of these older players, as much as I like them to do it, to get younger, the thing that I didn't really consider until you were talking about it is, what would this team look like?
Right.
It's not going to fly in this town. I just, it's hard to imagine you're going to go with, although obviously if you draft really well, you could start playing the younger players this year behind the older players, then push the older players out in 22 or 23, which should happen if they do this right. But you can't, you got to put a team out there that can compete a little bit.
Sure. I mean, think about 2016. That was supposed to be a rebuilding year. You had traded Sam Bradford. You're moving on with your number 2 pick, Carson Wentz. Your receivers were god-awful, right? I mean, they had talent at some spots, but they just weren't a very good team. Everybody knew that going into the year, and yet Doug still was sauteed by the fans for losing certain games. And Carson was great when they was 3-0, but then he started throwing some interceptions and he can't throw a good deep ball. And, Jim Schwartz can't do anything right when they gave up a bunch of points to Green Bay and Cincinnati back to back. So there's no such thing as I think people say this. They say, oh yeah, we're rebuilding. I get it. You take these cap hits, no problem. But then the season comes along and you lose a game and everybody loses their head.
No, because they'll go, hey, why did you cut that guy? Exactly right. I know. It
always happens.
It happens. Yeah, the Ravens did it successfully. They took after they won the Super Bowl, they knew they planned it. I remember talking to Brian Billick about it. They knew they were going to do it, and they did it. It was a 1-year transition period, kind of like Jeffrey Lurie was talking about. But I have no idea what this team's going to be like in 21. I have no idea how good they're going to be. We haven't hit free agency. We'll talk more about free agency. We're going to start turning the page. We'll update whatever news we need to update for Thursday's show. We're going to actually start talking about players they might actually target for free agency. It's been a little bit different. Last year, we gave you like 4 or 5 names a couple weeks before free agency, but this year's free agency, it's not about signing players. It's about restructured for the current roster. It's really interesting.
Definitely. And by the way, you're just saying the Ravens, it made me think of the Steelers, and they had a sort of comparable situation 2 years ago when Le'Veon Bell was like, I'm out. And then Antonio Brown caused so much trouble that right after an extension, that they had to get rid of him. And it was like, everybody's like, oh, this is a total dysfunction on the Steelers' part. And look how bad they are. And what did they do the next year? They lost their quarterback and they still went 8-8, 8-8, losing Roethlisberger, Antonio Brown. They were down to Duck Hodges, no Le'Veon Bell. You know why, Adam? Because they drafted really well. And that will be the story of the Eagles. Can they draft very well and build this thing back up? As you mentioned, we will talk about free agency in the next few pods, and that will do it. Oh, I have one last thing I want to tell you.
Okay.
This week coming up, this week coming up, I was told, is when Jalen Hurts and Eagles wide receivers, I don't know all of them, which one specifically, I imagine Jalen Reagor, Fulgham, will be in Frisco, Texas at the Exos training facility, EXOS in Frisco, Texas, which is like 30 miles north of Dallas, I think. It's a suburb of Dallas, to start their workouts. So Jalen Hurts is taking the bull by the horns and getting the receivers with him. And as I understand it, that starts this week.
Oh, finally. Okay, good. That's good, man. It's because I'll tell you what, he's going to be working with a lot of young players.
Yes, he is.
And they got to develop that chemistry, because if we don't have an off season, May and June, these workouts, I know it's not a lot, but they got to get their timing down. Anything helps.
Right.
Anything helps. You'll take anything at this point to get guys on the field together.
Sure.
I'm not real optimistic that we're going to have a May and June OTAs. It's sucks. It really does hurt these young players. It's just,
I still can't understand why you wouldn't. I just don't get
I know. I'm with you. Totally with you. I mean, heck, we're all, a lot of people getting vaccinated.
Yeah.
Come on.
All right. With that, I hope everybody's doing well and healthy. And Adam and I will be back. Thursday morning? You'll hear from us. I will be back Tuesday night, 8 o'clock, with our Ask ITB live stream. So start sending us your questions now. Use hashtag AskITB, and we look forward to doing that. That's going to do it for this episode of Inside the Birds, the leading podcast in Eagles intel. Thanks as always to our producer, Hunter Brody. Check him out, Sports Talk with Broads. It's on YouTube. Make sure you go to his Twitter account, @Broads81. He's doing a lot of new things there at his YouTube channel. So make sure you're checking him out. And as always, we thank you for flying with us inside the bird.